"Can I open my present now, Daddy?" Emma asked, her small hands already reaching toward the wrapped box beside her. David smiled. "After cake, sweetheart. That was the deal, remember?" It was Saturday afternoon at Rosie's Diner in suburban Seattle, and today was Emma's 7th birthday. The cake sat between them on the table, vanilla with buttercream frosting, decorated with purple flowers to match her dress. Nothing extravagant, but David had been saving for 3 weeks to afford it. 6 months of single parenting had taught him to plan for moments like this. His wife had left last spring. No drama, no shouting. Just a Tuesday morning confession that she wasn't built for this life, followed by 2 birthday cards since then with generic messages and no return address. 5 more minutes, David told Emma, checking his watch. Then we'll sing and cut the cake. That's when he noticed them. Near the entrance, a woman in medical scrubs stood with a little girl whose hair was done in careful braids decorated with colorful beads. The woman was checking her wallet, her fingers moving through it with the practiced efficiency of someone who already knew what she'd find. But it was her expression that made David pause. The look of a parent weighing what they could afford against what their child wanted. He'd worn that expression himself more times than he cared to count. The little girl beside her was perhaps 5, and she was staring, not rudely, but with the kind of open longing only children possess. She was staring directly at Emma's cake. David watched as the woman whispered something to her daughter, her hand gentle but firm on the child's shoulder. The little girl nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on that cake, a beacon of sweetness in whatever difficult day they were having. "Daddy?" Emma's voice pulled him back. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing, honey," David said softly. But it wasn't nothing, because the woman was now taking her daughter's hand, moving toward the door with the particular quickness of someone trying to exit before being noticed. The little girl looked back over her shoulder one last time, her beaded braids swaying with the movement. David looked at the sad little girl, then at his own happy daughter, and a thought, clear as a bell, cut through his mind. Not on her birthday, not today. He didn't know what he would say, but he knew he couldn't let them walk out that door. He stood up. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice cutting through the diner's noise. The woman stopped, her hand already on the door handle. She turned slowly, and David saw wariness flash across her face, the look of someone who'd learned to be careful about strangers' attention. "Yes?" she said, her voice controlled and measured. David realized he was standing in the middle of the diner with everyone looking at him and no clear plan for what to say next. Emma stared up at him with curious eyes. His heart was beating faster now, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "I noticed your daughter admiring my daughter's cake," he said, trying to keep his voice casual and friendly. The woman's expression tightened slightly. "I apologize if she was bothering you. She knows better than to stare." "No, no," David said quickly, taking a step closer. He searched for words that wouldn't sound like pity, wouldn't strip this woman of whatever dignity she was fighting to maintain. "It's my daughter's birthday, and we ordered way too much food. We were actually just saying we couldn't possibly finish this cake ourselves." It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that left room for grace. The woman's eyes met his, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. David saw her examining his words, searching for condescension or mockery. She'd clearly been through enough to know the difference between genuine kindness and something that felt like charity with strings attached. "That's kind of you," she said finally, her voice softening just slightly. "But we were just leaving." Her daughter made a small sound, not quite a whine, but disappointment made audible. She looked up at her mother with those wide, honest eyes that children have before the world teaches them to guard their feelings. "Please, Mama," the little girl whispered, her voice barely carrying across the diner. "Just a little piece?" David saw the woman's resolve waver. She looked down at her daughter with such tenderness that it made his chest ache. Then she looked back at David, and he could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, weighing her pride against her daughter's simple wish for a piece of birthday cake. "We really do have too much," David continued gently, "and honestly, it would make Emma's birthday better to share it. She's been wanting to make a new friend." Another small lie, but one that transformed charity into something mutual, something that preserved dignity on both sides. Emma, bless her 7-year-old instincts, caught on immediately. "You can sit with us," she announced brightly, her whole face lighting up with enthusiasm. "I love your beads. Are they birthday beads?" The little girl touched her braids self-consciously, a shy smile breaking across her face like sunrise. "No, my mama does them every Sunday." "Every Sunday?" Emma's eyes went wide with genuine admiration. "That's so cool. Daddy can barely do ponytails without making them crooked." The woman's mouth curved upward slightly, a small smile that she tried to suppress but couldn't quite hide. It was genuine, even if brief. David pressed gently. "Please, join us. It's just cake and good company. Nothing more than that." The words hung in the air between them. Not charity, not pity. Just two families sharing a table on a Saturday afternoon. The woman hesitated, and David could see the war happening behind her eyes. Pride battling against her daughter's happiness, dignity wrestling with the simple human need for connection. "Just for a few minutes," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. "And thank you. Truly." Relief washed through David, though he kept his expression neutral and welcoming. "Of course. I'm David, by the way, and this is Emma." "I'm Nicole," the woman said, guiding her daughter toward the booth with a gentle hand on her back. "And this is Zoe." They settled into the booth, Nicole and Zoe on one side, David and Emma on the other. The cake sat between them, a simple dessert that had somehow become a bridge between two families. "How old are you, Zoe?" Emma asked immediately, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. "5, Zoe said softly, holding up her hand with all 5 fingers spread wide. "I'm 7 today," Emma announced proudly. "That means I'm older." She paused, then pushed the cake plate closer to Zoe with both hands. "So I get to decide who picks the first piece, and I pick you. You should get the one with the biggest flower. See that purple one? That's the best piece on the whole cake." Zoe's eyes grew wide as she looked at the cake, then at Emma, then at her mother, seeking permission for this unexpected gift. Nicole nodded slowly, her throat working as she swallowed hard. "Go ahead, baby. And what do you say?" "Thank you," Zoe whispered, her voice filled with such genuine gratitude that David felt something tighten in his chest. He stood up, needing a moment to collect himself. "I'll get some extra plates and forks from Betty." He caught their waitress's eye and gestured for help. Betty arrived quickly. She was in her 60s and had been working at Rosie's longer than David had been alive. She carried plates and forks and wore a knowing look that said she'd witnessed this kind of moment before and deeply approved. "You want anything else, honey?" she asked Nicole directly, her tone warm and completely devoid of judgment. Nicole opened her mouth, then closed it. David saw her fingers tighten around her purse, saw the mental math happening again. "Actually," David interjected smoothly, "could you bring 2 chocolate milkshakes for the girls? It's a birthday tradition we do." Emma's eyes lit up. This was definitely not a tradition they'd ever done before, but she was 7 and smart enough to play along. "The best tradition," she agreed with enthusiastic nodding. Nicole's jaw tightened and she started to shake her head. "That's really not necessary." "It's included with the birthday special," David said, meeting her eyes with a look that gently asked her to let him do this small thing. "They throw it in with the cake package, otherwise it goes to waste." Betty, bless her observant heart, didn't miss a beat. "That's absolutely right. Birthday special, 2 chocolate shakes coming right up." She turned to Nicole with a genuine smile. "What about you, Nicole? Can I get you something to drink?" The use of her name, offered without Nicole having given it, Betty having simply overheard, seemed to ease something in Nicole's posture. It was a small gesture of inclusion, of being seen as a person rather than a stranger. "Just water would be wonderful, please," Nicole said. "Make it 2 waters," David added. "And Betty?" "Thank you." Betty winked at him and walked away, understanding perfectly what was happening at this table. As she left, David began cutting the cake with careful precision. He served Zoe first with a generous piece, not so large it looked like pity, but substantial enough to be satisfying. Then Emma, then Nicole, and finally himself. For a moment there was silence except for the soft sound of forks against plates. David watched Zoe take her first bite, saw her eyes close briefly as she savored the sweetness, and felt something warm and profound expand in his chest. Emma, who had never been comfortable with extended silence, piped up again. "Do you like princesses, Zoe? I have a princess coloring book at home, but I already colored most of the pages. You could have it if you want. Daddy says we should share things we're not using anymore. Zoe nodded enthusiastically, a small dab of frosting at the corner of her mouth. I love princesses so much. Mama says I'm a princess every single day. That's because you are, Nicole said softly, reaching over to wipe the frosting from her daughter's face with her thumb, a gesture so tender and automatic that it spoke of countless similar moments between them. Emma watched this interaction with fascination. My daddy says I'm a princess too, but he also says princesses have to clean their rooms and do their homework, which seems not very princess-like to me. David couldn't help but smile. Princesses are responsible for their kingdoms, sweetheart. My kingdom is very small and has way too many dirty socks in it, Emma replied with complete seriousness, making Nicole laugh out loud, a real, genuine laugh that transformed her entire face and made her look younger, lighter, more at ease. That sounds exactly like Zoe's kingdom, Nicole said, shaking her head with amusement. I find socks in the strangest places, under the couch cushions, behind the bathroom door. Once I even found one in the refrigerator. The refrigerator? David asked, genuinely baffled. How does a sock end up in a refrigerator? That's exactly what I said. Nicole's eyes sparkled for a moment, the guardedness dropping away just slightly. She told me she was keeping it cold for later. I still don't know what that means. The ice was breaking now. The awkwardness was melting away like spring frost under sunshine. Betty returned with the milkshakes, placing them in front of the girls with a conspiratorial wink. Zoe looked at hers with such wonder, as if the tall glass of chocolate shake was the most magical thing she'd seen in weeks. Maybe it was. What do you say, Zoe? Nicole prompted gently, her hand resting on her daughter's shoulder. Thank you so much, Zoe said, looking first at Betty, then at David with those big, sincere eyes that only children possess. You're very welcome, sweetheart, David replied, his voice warm. As the girls sipped their milkshakes and continued their animated discussion about which princess had the best dress and the coolest powers, David found himself in a quieter, more adult conversation with Nicole. Long day? He asked, nodding toward her scrubs with gentle understanding. Nicole looked down at herself as if she'd momentarily forgotten what she was wearing. Double shift at the medical center downtown. Zoe was with my neighbor, but I finished earlier than I expected. She paused, seeming to weigh whether to continue. We were going to go to the park because it's free, but Zoe said she was hungry, and I thought maybe we could just come in and look at the menu, see what's possible. She didn't finish the sentence with the full truth, but David heard it anyway in the spaces between her words. I get it, David said simply, with no trace of judgment. I really do. Nicole studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. Single parent? 6 months now, David admitted, surprised at how easily the words came. Still figuring it all out? You? 3 years, Nicole said, and there was a weight of experience in those 2 words. Zoe's father isn't in the picture, never really was. They sat with that shared understanding for a moment, the knowledge of what it meant to do it all alone. The doctor's appointments and school meetings, the packed lunches and bedtime stories, the worry and exhaustion and fierce protective love that made you keep going even when you were running on empty. It's not easy, Nicole said quietly, her voice low enough that the girls couldn't hear over their own conversation. Some weeks are tighter than others. David nodded, appreciating her honesty. I refinanced my car last month just to make this birthday work. Had to choose between new tires and a cake. The cake won. Nicole's eyes widened slightly with recognition and something like relief, the relief of being understood without judgment. You really didn't have to do all this for us. I wanted to, David interrupted gently. And honestly, Emma needed this as much as anyone. She doesn't have many friends yet. We moved here from San Francisco right after the divorce. New city, new school, new everything. She's been struggling to find her place. Zoe, too, Nicole said, her voice softening with shared understanding. We had to move to a cheaper apartment across town about 6 months ago. Different school district, different neighborhood. Starting over is hard at any age, but especially when you're 5 and you don't understand why everything has to change. They watched their daughters together. 2 little girls who'd been complete strangers just minutes ago, now laughing and bonding over chocolate milkshakes and princess preferences as if they'd known each other for years. Children had a gift for that, David thought. They didn't carry the weight of pride and circumstance that adults did. They just connected, simply and purely. "Mama," Zoe said suddenly, turning to Nicole with bright eyes, "can Emma come to our house sometime? Please?" Nicole's face froze for just a fraction of a second. David saw the flash of panic in her eyes, the immediate mental calculation of what her home looked like, whether it was nice enough, good enough, enough to invite someone over. "Or Zoe could come to our place," David offered smoothly, rescuing the moment with practiced ease. "We have that princess coloring book Emma mentioned. And honestly, our apartment could use the energy of another kid. It gets pretty quiet with just the two of us." Emma practically bounced in her seat with excitement. "Yes, can she come over, Daddy? Please? We could color and watch movies, and I could show her my stuffed animal collection." "If it's okay with Zoe's mom," David said, looking at Nicole with a question in his eyes, but no pressure in his voice. Something passed between them in that moment, gratitude and understanding, and the mutual recognition of parents who were both struggling and both trying their absolute best with limited resources and unlimited love. "I think we could arrange that," Nicole said carefully, a small smile playing at her lips. "Zoe would love it." Then something unexpected happened. Betty reappeared at their table, but instead of checking on their food, she held the check in her hand with an odd expression on her face. She placed it face down on the table and leaned in close, her voice quiet and warm. "That elderly couple sitting at the corner booth over there," she said, nodding subtly toward the back of the diner. "They just paid your entire bill. Both families. Everything. They specifically asked me not to make a big deal about it, but they wanted you to know that they saw what happened here today and it touched their hearts. They said to tell you that kindness deserves kindness." David's eyes widened in complete shock. He looked back toward the corner booth. An older man and woman, probably in their 70s, were gathering their things and putting on their coats, deliberately not making eye contact but wearing quiet smiles. Nicole's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes immediately filling with tears. "It happens sometimes," Betty said with a knowing smile that carried decades of witnessing human goodness. "Good people recognizing good people doing good things. You folks have a truly blessed day now." She walked away with a gentle pat on the table, leaving David and Nicole sitting in stunned, overwhelming silence. "Did that just happen?" Nicole's voice broke. "Yeah," David said quietly, his own throat tight with emotion. "It did." Emma and Zoe, momentarily distracted from their conversation, looked up at the adults with curious expressions, sensing that something significant had just happened, but not quite understanding what. "Someone paid for our food?" Emma asked, tilting her head. "Yes, sweetheart," David managed. "Someone very kind." Nicole pressed her napkin to her eyes, laughing and crying at the same time in that way people do when emotion overwhelms them completely. Nicole looked at him, really looked at him, and nodded slowly. "You started this. You invited us over when you saw Zoe staring. You didn't have to do that. You could have just looked away like most people do." "But I didn't want to look away," David said honestly, "because someone did something similar for me and Emma about 3 months ago. Different place, different situation, but the same feeling of being seen when I felt invisible. I promised myself then that if I ever had the chance to pass it on, I would. And now someone's passing it on to both of us," Nicole said, wiping her eyes with trembling fingers. "Maybe that's how it works," David said thoughtfully, looking over at the elderly couple who were now heading toward the exit. "We see each other, we help when we can, and it ripples outward like stones in water. One act of kindness inspiring another." The older man caught David's eye as they passed the table. He simply nodded, a gesture of acknowledgement and approval, and shared humanity that needed no words. His wife smiled warmly at Nicole and the girls before they disappeared through the door into the afternoon sunshine. "I need to thank them," Nicole said, starting to stand up. "I think the best way to thank them," David said gently, "is to do what they did someday when you can. Pass it forward to someone else who needs it." Nicole sank back into her seat, nodding as understanding washed over her face. "You're right. That's exactly what they'd want." "Daddy," Emma said, tugging on his sleeve with concern in her voice, "why is everyone crying? Is something wrong?" David knelt down beside the booth so he was at eye level with his daughter. "No, sweetheart, nothing's wrong. Sometimes people cry because they're really, really happy and grateful. The nice people who just left paid for everyone's food because they wanted to do something kind. Because we shared our cake with Zoe? Emma asked, trying to understand the cause and effect. Partly, David said. They saw us being kind and wanted to be kind too. That's how goodness works. It spreads from person to person. Emma considered this seriously, then announced with the certainty of a child who'd just learned an important life lesson, "Then I'm going to be kind to lots of people so it keeps spreading." "That's my girl," David said, his voice thick with pride and love. Before they left the diner, David and Nicole exchanged phone numbers, both of them typing carefully into their phones with the slightly awkward awareness of two adults navigating new friendship territory. "For that play date," David said as he saved her contact information. "For the play date," Nicole agreed warmly. "And David, thank you doesn't feel like enough. You saw us today, really saw us. You didn't look away when it would have been easier to do nothing. And because of that, something beautiful happened. I won't forget this. Zoe won't forget this." "Thank you for staying," David replied sincerely, "for trusting a stranger enough to accept help. That takes courage, too." At the door, the girls hugged goodbye like they were old friends being separated after summer camp, rather than new acquaintances parting after an hour together. Zoe waved enthusiastically as they walked out into the afternoon sunshine, Nicole's hand resting protectively on her daughter's shoulder, but her steps lighter somehow, less burdened than when they had arrived. David watched them go through the window, then looked back at their empty booth where crumpled napkins and empty plates told the story of an unexpected connection. Emma tugged on his hand. "Daddy, can we come back here next year for my birthday?" "Absolutely," David said. "This is definitely our place now." As they gathered Emma's present and the small box of leftover cake Betty had packed for them, David felt something shift inside him, a sense that the universe had taught him something important today about generosity and grace and the quiet power of seeing other people's struggles and choosing to help rather than look away. That night, after Emma was asleep with her new stuffed unicorn clutched in her arms, David's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number that had become known. "This is Nicole. Thank you for seeing us, for not looking away. It changed our whole day, maybe our whole week, possibly more than that." David stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the weight and warmth of her words, then typed back carefully, "Thank you for staying, for trusting me enough to let us help." Emma hasn't stopped talking about Zoe since we got home. She says today was her best birthday ever, and honestly, I think it might have been mine too. Looking forward to that play date soon. He paused, his thumbs hovering over the screen, then added one more thought. We all need someone to see us sometimes, to really see us. Today a lot of people saw each other, and something good came from it. That elderly couple reminded me that kindness multiplies when we're brave enough to start it. David put his phone down and walked quietly to Emma's doorway, standing there in the darkness, watching his daughter sleep peacefully. Her face was relaxed and content, one small hand curled near her cheek. Tomorrow they'd return to the usual struggles, the bills that needed juggling, the tight budget that required constant creativity, the exhausting but rewarding dance of single parenthood. Sometimes the best gifts we can give don't cost money. They cost attention, compassion, courage, and the willingness to reach out when someone needs it, even when it's uncomfortable or uncertain. And sometimes, when we give those gifts freely and without expectation of return, the universe finds unexpected ways to give them back. If this story touched your heart, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel. These stories about everyday people doing extraordinary things, they matter more than ever. They remind us that we're not alone, that kindness still exists in this world, and that small moments of compassion can create ripples that reach farther than we ever imagined. Please take a moment to leave a comment below and let me know. Where are you watching from? I love hearing from this incredible community all around the world. Whether you're watching from a small town or a big city, whether you're a parent struggling like David and Nicole, or someone who remembers what it felt like to be seen when you felt invisible, your stories and your presence here mean everything to me. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for believing that goodness still matters. I'll see you in the next story.